Thank you for joining the third annual Spring Financial Aid webinar series. This series is brought to you by the Northern California College Promise Coalition, or NCCPC for short. NCCPC is a collective impact coalition with over 40 members serving over 150,000 students across 12 Northern California counties. Our geographic footprint includes the 9 Bay Area counties, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Tulare counties. We bring over 200 leaders together through committees, convenings, and working groups around 4 key pillars. Number 1, advancing public policy. Number 2, building campus partnerships. Number 3, scaling workforce pipelines. And number 4, convening communities of practice. Our members are locally and nationally recognized college access and success programs, advocacy organizations, college and neighborhood promise programs, K-12 and charter school districts, education technology nonprofits, individual advocates, and cities and mayors. We believe that working together, we can impact systemic change on behalf of all of the students we serve and beyond.
It is now my privilege to introduce today's session and our speakers. John Tamrat is Partner Success Manager at MoneyThink, and Dinara Seitova is Partnerships Manager at MoneyThink. Their presentation, Let's Talk College Affordability. As a reminder, if at any time during today's presentation you have questions, please use the Padlet. I'll drop the link again to the Padlet in the chat. This is where we'll go for questions when we get to the Q&A. You can heart a question you already see to upvote that question for our speakers. We'll now turn it over to them and begin their presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Beth and Mayor and NCCPC for allowing us this opportunity to speak with all of you on a very important topic around college affordability. So again, just want to introduce myself. My name is John Tamrat, the Partner Success Manager. I work closely with our partners and advisors who are on the ground working to support families, caregivers, and students through the important process of selecting and finding the institutions that best fit and serve them so they can thrive moving forward. Now I'm going to pass it on to Dinara to go ahead and do her introduction, and then we'll get into our agenda.
Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. Very excited about this opportunity to talk about this great topic. I am Partnerships Manager at MoneyThink, and let's take a quick look at our agenda. In a few slides, we're going to talk about MoneyThink and the important work we do in this space. And then we'll unpack the college affordability problem we have in this country and how we are trying to solve it by having our proprietary tool called Decided that my colleague John will go over and do a live demo, and he will cover the student dashboard and all the great features available to you. And then my favorite part of today's session is the college planning and student scenarios, because it truly shows you different ways how this tool can be helpful in your college selection journey. And I will make sure we leave room for Q&A from all of you. But as we mentioned earlier, please let's keep it interactive. If you have any questions, please post them in the Padlet or chat feature. But before we dive into what is MoneyThink, we'd like to know who do we have today in the room. Please type in the chat if you are a parent, caregiver, student, or an advisor. Great. Just give people a few more seconds. Okay, well, that will help us customize today's content and make sure you get the most value. Also would like to know, what schools have you applied, or what schools did your kids apply that they're most excited about? Because I'm sure they have a dream school, and we just want to know what that school is for them. So please, again, leverage the chat feature to do that. Great. Well, thank you for that. So who is MoneyThink? So we are a nonprofit that harnesses the power of people and technology to bring transparency to college costs so that young people are equipped to invest in their future. As we all know, college decision is one of the most important financial decisions and maybe even life-altering decisions you will ever make. It can truly set you up for upward professional mobility and growth. You will build relationships that will last your lifetime. I'm personally a first-generation immigrant, and I wish a tool like Decided was available back when I was making a very challenging college selection decision. I didn't have parents, I didn't have advisors to mentor and guide me along the way. So we are committed to bring simplicity and transparency to this multi-layered, very complicated and complex process of college selection. Let's take a look at a typical college journey. After the college and financial aid applications have been submitted, students and families wait to hear back from colleges to see whether they've been accepted. Usually, you can start hearing back from the colleges around as early as December. So once you receive the acceptance letters, the next most important document that families will need to look for will be a financial award letter. Usually it's either mailed to you directly or can be accessed online through a college portal. So be sure to be on the lookout for this important document. We highly recommend that you wait to receive letters from only colleges that you've been accepted to. I know it can be exciting to jump at a first letter, but we really want to make sure you have all the options available to you before you make this important decision. And then you take your time and do the proper research and due diligence to research and compare all the financial aid packages that are offered from all the schools you've been accepted to before making the enrollment decision. Once families choose the college they plan to enroll to, they will need to either accept or decline the financial aid that has been offered to them. And then comes the exciting part. You focus on getting ready, collecting your supplies, completing orientation classes, and registering for classes. So today we're going to talk about a very important step around college acceptance and award financial aid letters from schools, because this is the step that's most complicated, most challenging, not just for students and families, but also for advisors who are supporting students along the way. So why do we have such a big college affordability problem? We all agree that enrolling in college with sustainable, educated financial planning is critical for student success and for their future career. But there are some disparities that are glaring, right? Because we know that low-income students, first-generation students, for them, the likelihood of attaining a degree is much lower. And at MoneyThink, we truly believe that this is mainly due to full college cost information being difficult to obtain. And even when you have it, it's really challenging to compare, and even more challenging to interpret the confusing data that's being presented to you. especially if you don't have somebody to guide you along the way, like how I felt back in the days. Award letters are very confusing. So, for example, if you look at them, they choose to use hundreds of unique phrases to describe federal loans. Less than 30% of award letters differentiate between aid and loan, because we know some are based on merit and some are based on financial need. So it really makes it difficult for families and students to understand what is my actual cost that I will have to pay back. And as an advisor, you have lots of information available to you, but it can be also overwhelming because the information may not be readily available, or maybe not very trustworthy, maybe not up to date. So it's very difficult to decide what resources do I use to make this difficult decision. So now John will take us through an example of one confusing letter.
Thank you, Dinara. Now, before we get right into that award letter, I just want to state out today is the March 2nd deadline. So if you are a parent working with your student who is a senior who's looking to consider going to college in the fall, make sure that you've completed the FAFSA application or the California DREAM Act, as that is a very pivotal document that you need to complete to have financial aid. Now, as we get into this, let's get into in this example what a award letter might look like. Here's one that's in front of you, and they may look something similar like this, but they also have different varieties on them, so keep a lookout for that. So as you can see from this letter, I want to just give you all a minute. Can you identify how much money this student will need to have to cover their cost? What is their out-of-pocket cost that this letter is telling them? Once you think you've gotten it, go ahead and type it in the chat. I'll give us a little bit of time for you to look through it. And if you're looking through it and you're not finding it, or it may be, a little confusing, that's fine. Go ahead and let us know that as well. We've got our first response for 6,679. We have a question about, is this for the whole year? Yes. So looking for the full year, what is the cost telling this family or student that they need to be ready to contribute? There we go. Okay, 6,609. Okay, so thank you for participating in this. Just want to point this out. This wasn't supposed to trip up the audience members here, but it is to show the reality how confusing this can really be. So let's look at this letter and we'll break it down step by step. As you can see from this letter, the direct cost, which is the cost paid directly to the college, like the tuition and fees, are around $40,904. The indirect costs associated with this would be about the $23,633. This includes the room and board, the personal expense, the books, and transportation. This means that the total cost to attend that institution is $64,537. Now, and representing that as the same as total aid awarded to us is very misleading, especially since the bulk of that aid is actually unsubsidized student loans and Parent Plus loans, which are not guaranteed, also may have higher interest rate, with that interest rate beginning to accrue on day one as opposed to when a student finishes college. In addition, the estimated amount due is misleading, as a student will inevitably have expenses related to housing and transportation. As you can see, this can be incredibly confusing and can often lead to students selecting colleges that are not affordable, thus resulting in crippling student debt. So this student can find themselves in a situation where they decide to enroll while thinking that 6,000 is what their out-of-pocket cost is, and then finding themselves on campus having to take out those Parent Plus loans, right? And those loans come out to about, there's 28,000 that they're getting in free financial aid. That means the free scholarships and grants, right? So to cover the remaining costs, that family or that student needs to account for $35,812. that they would have to cover. That could be through their own money out of pocket. It could be through loans that they take out. But again, that's a cost that they're going to be responsible for. It could be through some work study. But again, that student will have to make sure that they apply for that job and then are working those hours as well. We want to highlight and point this out just to show you that this document, even though it looks organized, can be pretty deceiving if you're not really looking for all the right things within that context.
So John, we have a question.
Yes.
Why is financial aid so different between colleges?
That is a great question. And that is at the heart of what we as an organization are trying to support. So interestingly enough, just to give at a high level, when it comes to VA, so a lot of our military, there's actually a law that's passed that there's a formal way that colleges have to represent their award letters, but that is also not required for the general audience members. So in a way, without being as direct as I can, I think a lot of schools want to make sure that they make themselves look good as an option, right? So one way to do that is when you're kind of disguising it, you're saying we're giving you aid by loans, not being direct with those costs, not putting them together. It's kind of a way to just give yourself a hierarchy. What you'll notice is with some of those top tier schools or those who have large endowments, they tend to have a better formal way of addressing how they present that data, because they're also usually giving the most value to those students, right? They have the funds to give a lot more money to those students. And then there hasn't been any passing legislation yet. We're hoping that comes down the road as well to make it more of a formalized pathway of how all the award letters are being handed out to students, but that's not the case currently. So a lot of reasons. So each school has their own interest in mind rather than the student or the families at the heart of it, is what I would say from my personal and professional experience. All good. Any more outstanding questions?
Let's keep going.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yep, no problem. So we just talked about that award letter. Now I want to talk to you a little more about how MoneyThink defines affordability, right? And how we take our methodology into that process. So at MoneyThink, we define the affordability based on the gap or what is left after all the scholarships and grants have been applied towards the student's tuition, their fees, housing, and meals. And that's important for us because those are the non-negotiables. You have to pay your tuition. You have to have some living expense. Even if you decide to live at home, there will be expenses associated with that. So within our tool, we make sure we highlight to students some of those costs that are upcoming, whether it's estimated ones for them living at home or the ones that are costs that are related to housing on campus. Now, when you have that subtracted, what is remaining is going to be that gap. Within that gap, if that gap is only 5,500 or less, plus with some work study, so up to 7,500, your gap, that means it's going to be affordable because you can cover that with 5,500 in the federal subsidized and unsubsidized loans that our Pell eligible students can have access to. We don't recommend taking out more than that amount. And whenever possible, getting that even lower, that's our recommendation. Now, if you break one of the guidance, whether that's you taking out more than the 5,500 in loans, or you're working more than suggested hours that we have allocated, that's where you're getting to a somewhat affordable option, and that is between $7,500 and $11,000 gap. Anything that's beyond the 11,000 plus will get you in the territory of not affordable. So that means you're breaking both our guidance of taking out potentially more in loans and also maybe working 20 hours or more. Why do we say this is critical? Research has shown that students who are working more than 20 hours usually will have a hit in their academic performance, right? But even more so, they're missing out on the opportunity of why they're going to college. An important aspect of that is the social network and connections you're building, the internship opportunities you're cultivating, the relationships you're building with professors, right? But if your student's always working and just running to their class, they're missing out on these vital, important pieces. So our recommendation is having students work 10 hours as the happy medium, and then having manageable student debt.
John, we have a question.
Yes.
What are subsidized loans?
Yes, so subsidized loans are federal loans, meaning that when the student takes them out, if they're eligible for it, the Department of Ed is actually going to be covering the interest rate. So if they take out $5,000 their first year in college until they graduate and 6 months after, or if they stopped out and 6 months after they've stopped out, that's when the interest starts accruing and payments have to be made. When it's unsubsidized loan, it means the interest is not being paid by the Department of Ed. Therefore, it is accruing value on it. You can choose to pay that money down to keep it the same, but you also can leave it and not required to make payments, and again, until 6 months after you graduated or 6 months since you are officially a student. So that's the difference. Whereas a private loan doesn't get those guarantees. Those you're paying right away. Federal loans that are Parent Plus loans, same thing. You have to apply for them. They don't have favorable interest and they don't have favorable terms. So good question. All right, if we're good, we'll go to the next slide. So yeah, keep those questions coming in. Now, next part that I want to talk about and go over is what is an affordable college? We kind of just showed you that it can be confusing to have these financial aid offer letters that are not direct, that don't clearly tell the students what they owe. We talked about the threshold of how to think about things. So what does that really mean? So although we define the threshold when it comes to affordability, there really isn't an easy way for students and families to differentiate between affordable quality college versus the expensive schools that can have poor outcomes. So to have a holistic approach in identifying those high quality, affordable colleges, each student will need to make sure to compare that financial aid offer from each school along with other important fit factors. That can include graduation rates, the earning potential that students are having after attending that university, that diversity on campus, make sure that the student has that sense of belonging that could be critical to their success, the programs they're considering, and how that school can help elevate them into their career progressions. So in the end, the goal is to find that right school that matches the need of the students with the affordability in mind. And this is a big and important part because sometimes our families or even our students assume, hey, I am in a similar circumstance as my friend, so I should probably get the same aid. That school will probably be just as good for me. That is not always the case. We've seen plenty of times where same student portfolio, but they get different financial aid award letters. We also are recognizing each individual is unique, and so they have their own needs that need to be met. And so we really want to emphasize the importance of students thinking about what is it that they need and how is that college providing that value to them, not only in the financial term and supporting them, but in all the other aspects as well. I'm going to pause for any questions, anything in the chat.
Yes, we have a question. Is the Decided app translated, and if yes, in what languages?
Yes, great question. It is not yet translated. That is on one of our future features that we're trying to work on. But currently right now, it's just in English, but we'll be working on that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do one more, John. I'm a volunteer who mentors students. Can I use this app?
Yes, so the tool is free for students. It's free for any adult to create and support their student through it as well. I've also had the privilege of seeing parents who've actually gone and created an account and had their students then added so that way they can collaborate and work together on the platform. Again, it's free access. We want to make sure the students and families have the very important information they need to easily compare it. So we want to take out as much of the stress, the administrative and the searching of all this information, so that way you have that data insight to make that critical decision, which is what we've seen. When you give the individuals who are going to be the most impacted that power of decision making with all the information, they tend to make the best decision for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do one more question. By the way, everybody's really good questions. Please keep them coming. We want to make sure we get to all of your questions. What if all the colleges I choose are not affordable? Can I still make one of them more affordable?
Yes, I will actually cover that a little more when we do the demo and when we have our guides. So there's different scenarios, and that is a reality scenario as well. So it's more about how do we reassess, right? So it's also just not thinking from the perspective of if maybe the first selection of colleges that I applied to don't work out, that I have to choose one no matter what. It's really trying to veer away from that and really trying to find the right pathway for you. But I'm going to discuss that a little bit more, and maybe we'll come back to that question towards the end. Sound good? Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the tool itself, and then I'm going to just do a little demo, and through there, we'll open it up for some questions as well as I highlight the tool and its capabilities. Again, I want to reiterate, Decided for Students is a free web app, so you don't have to download it. You can just go online, you can create the account. It's easy as just using your name and email. We don't ask for any more. And a lot of that is based off of feedback from students, very protective over their data, right? And rightfully so. So we only ask for just the email and their name to get started. They can see a lot more information. Throughout that process, we may ask them or encourage them adding a zip code or ethnicity that gives them more personalized information. We don't sell any data or keep track of that data for marketing purposes for external audiences as well. So that data is important for just providing more feedback to that student that's insightful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to our, let me find it right here. Can I get a thumbs up so we can see the screen? All right, great. So again, you can just go to decided.org, both for the student or advisor or parent who's want to create that account. I'm going to show you the logged in portfolio already. There will be some tool tips to help guide students. So if you have a junior that you're working with, they can get started on this as well, or a sophomore, especially when they're in their exploration phase. So one of the ways we do that is just making sure slowly throughout we're having students think about the value that they're really looking for. Maybe I'm a student who wants to stay in state, so that's very important to me. So I'm going to add California as my filter. So I'm going to go from thousands of accredited universities and institutions in the US to now 285. Maybe I want to filter that a little more specifically now. Maybe I am a student who is looking at computer and information science as a major. So I want my school to have that. So I went from 285 to 78 colleges. Maybe even then I want to go into the type. And I went to a very small high school, so I want to go to a large public institution. And right now I'm looking at the 4-year route. We also have the ability for students to select HBCUs or HSI serving institutions as well. Again, we want them to find the value that they're searching for within their institution. So that's part of the filtering process as well. So as you can see, right in that filter quickly, I went from thousands of schools, if I didn't have any idea of where to start my search, to now a manageable list that I can work through. So let's go ahead and just say I'm going to add a school right now, and I'll go back to my path. Once I've added a lot more schools, I will be able to see all the school cards. Right now, I've actually put award letters and selected different status points for each one. As you can see, as a student in these school cards, you'll be able to get quick highlighted information about each school. So as you can see, there's ones that I've applied to, there's ones that I've been accepted to, there's ones that I'm interested in and currently looking at, and then there's some that I've uploaded award letters. Now, if I really want to get into just looking at the statistics for the schools, if it's a brand new school, let's go to the one I just added, or we'll just do this one, Florida Atlantic. I can look at the high level of what is the cost I need to consider. So the college bill will be easily reflected for me for the life budget, which is the indirect cost, the money that you don't pay to the school, but you need to learn to budget for that. Not all schools make that readily available. Within Decided, we make sure students are thinking about those costs as well. Based on student feedback, we also changed the visual of how we're representing that number, because from their feedback, they told us they want to see color, they want to see pie charts, because that makes it easier to understand and visually comprehend the information that they need to really consider and look at. The students will be able to put their majors in there. If it's a top major, that is shown what the top 3 majors are at that institution. As you can see right here, it shows out of state because I've actually put my zip code in there, and I can change these factors. I can change my zip code and I can change my ethnicity. Doing that will also reflect that change within the schools that I'm selecting, recognizing if it's in-state versus out-of-state. With ethnicity, I've selected the ethnicity, so I'm getting the 4-year grad rate for students like me. And that's very important. If I'm a student who cares about my sense of belonging, that's an important factor. I want to have more affinity and community And that's the way I can kind of look at that. Also, it's important for me to just see what's the success rate for students on campus that are like me. And if that graduation rate is too low, now priority for me is I want to graduate in 4 years because I understand the financial impact if I stay beyond 4 years. That's where this is helpful as well. I know there are other competing tools that are out there. Many of them are showcasing 6-year, 8-year. I'm super happy and proud that MoneyThink is showing the 4-year, because this is not to say that students aren't successful if they're graduating in 5 or 6, but it is tell the reality to them. What are the ramifications if you stay the 5th year, right? That 6 and 8-year ones have higher graduation rates, but that makes the school look good. So that this opens up the conversation for the family, for the student. Is there something I need to do to make sure I can be part of that 34%? Is there support services that I can utilize to make sure I graduate in 4 years? Or asking the admission question, are all the students that look like me in your engineering department and they're graduating 5 years? Because that might make sense. Or is there actually a red flag that I didn't consider? There's not, if any, groups that are there. There's a lot. There's not a sense of belonging for a lot of the students. They are transferring out, right? Those would be critical conversations that can come out of just looking at that. We also highlight the earning potential after 6 years of attending that, attending that college. That's important for those who are going to be taking loans out for certain careers. It can be manageable to take out a little more than 5,500. If you're going to be an engineer, right? We know the starting income for those careers or STEM related ones are a little bit higher. So that might be where you're having a little more wiggle room if you're considering, do I take a little more than 5,500? The earning potential could help guide that conversation. Sense of belonging that we just discussed is also another way to showcase diversity on campus, whether that is through ethnicity or socioeconomics, right? A lot of our students that we work with sometimes are crossing out certain schools because they don't believe their students like them on campus. With this tool, they're going to be able to see, actually, that was a wrong assumption that I had. There's actually more students, diverse students there than I actually initially expected, right? Or maybe it's validating, like, yeah, you're correct. Are you going to be okay going to an institution where you're not going to have that sense of belonging that you're desiring and seeking out? Okay, so just showed you what some of those fit factors look like. I want to go ahead and show you what an award letter process upload will look like. So students can go in here to upload a JPEG or a screenshot of their award letters. They come in different forms, in different formats, as you've seen. This one's a little different from the other one that we just had as well. Once a student uploads it, we've been training our algorithms to pick up some tables and formatting like this, and then it pulls out only the free money. So it recognizes and sees that there's work study. It recognizes and sees that there's loans, but we are highlighting to the student what is actually the free scholarships and grants in that award letter. If there's ever a question of like, oh, there's an error, or I don't think that was correct, students can report an error. We've had sometimes students reach out, but a lot of the times they were assuming, how come my numbers don't add up? And we have to let them know, you were considering that before with loans. And we're specifically trying to highlight to you what is going to be the cost that you have to make up within that factor. So as you can see it in this format for UC Irvine for this award letter, being a in-state tuition, my scholarships cover all my tuition. It covers majority of my housing, and there's only a little bit left for my indirect costs. So my college bill for the annual one that I expect to have to cover is about $1,000. So if it's a semester schedule, it'd be 500. And then I need to make sure as a student that I'm budgeting 3,745. Now, we give them little guidance over here. How can I pay for that? There's multiple options. You can use some loans. You can work some part-time as well. If you opted out to taking out the loan, that way you didn't have to work, that's feasible, still be affordable. If you have some family savings or you're working in the summer, you're bringing that money in to help pay for that college expense, maybe you're not even taking out the loan and you have that planned and budgeted out. So that's another way where you get to that factor. And then lastly, want to get to the big part that's important, which is what we're discussing today, is making sure students collect all of their financial aid offer letters and upload them all so they can see them side by side, because this is critical to making informed decisions, right? So now I can see all of my options left to right. I can compare and favorite against my top schools. So maybe my top school was UC Davis in the beginning, But if I'm looking across, not only am I seeing, okay, there's other schools that are a lot more affordable. Well, what about graduation rate? Is that really important to me? Because now it might be, if I'm looking at the difference, not only is UC Irvine more affordable, the graduation rate is a lot higher, but the thing I have to consider is the diversity may not be the same compared to other institutions, right? So that would be the discussion points for students and families to have, and advisors to be engaged with as well. And you can see all of the scholarships that we actually took away from the award letters and put it on here. And I think I see a question in the chat.
Yeah,
How many?
there
Yeah.
are a couple questions.
Yep.
Yep. So let's just do in order. So one of the requirements for the UC Blue and Gold Opportunity Plan is to earn less than 80,000. If my family earns slightly more, is it better to submit my application as an independent?
Are we talking about FAFSA? Because I'm assuming that is, yeah, I would just need a little more clarity on that.
Let's see, it's anonymous. Can you please clarify for us in the chat feature or by posting another question? And we'll come back to that once we get more clarity. Next question we had was, so this has all the colleges I might want to go to. Does it say the clubs I could get involved in?
Great question. So right now, the main focus is on the top fit factors. So additional things like clubs you can get involved in, support services. We would love to be able to incorporate that. We just don't have a trusted source database that we can pull for all these institutions. So a lot of this is we're getting it from sources that are annually updated through either iPads and others. But currently, you're not able to see and filter clubs on here, no.
Next question. My friends are mixed race. What do they select when they use this tool? I saw black, but what if they're more than one thing?
Yes, this is a great question as well. One that our product team's been, and our just whole team in general, been debating around. So we understand and we recognize, your ethnicity is not just in one box, right? It's hard to identify that fully. Unfortunately, right now, the way we're pulling the data from the national databases, governmental databases, it has to be based on one of the selections. So what we've done instead is allowed you to pick and edit and change as needed. So it might be where you're selecting different ones and just seeing what those markers are across. But right now, they're not really tracking it where it's all mixed together, or you have more choices as hybrid selections. But we're trying to see if there's alternative ways we can collect that data and make it more informed from that process. But great question.
What if I want to include money or work? Can I still add that in later? What about if I have a scholarship? Can I add that?
Yes. So the scholarship aspect, we will be releasing an update shortly, soon, where you can come in to actually go ahead and add an outside scholarship component to that. So that way you can fill up your rest of your bar if you've gotten that. We were slower to do it first because we want to make sure that students are more cognizant of the actual financial aid that they're getting. But now we're ready to thoughtfully roll that out ability. When it comes to work and other sources of income that you're bringing in, I mean, you potentially could label it yourself. We haven't fully released it for that aspect yet. So right now, the focus is being able to see what you're getting from the school, from the award letter, and then with the update, being able to add those specific outside scholarships that you've gotten as well. But I want to be mindful that when you're doing that, you need to be aware of schools that do practice scholarship displacement. I know California just passed legislation to try and stop that. Maryland's already stopped that, but I'm not sure if it's fully in progress yet. So just be mindful of that.
Great, thanks. Let's do a couple more questions.
Okay.
How many colleges can be added?
Yeah, you can add as many as you need to, because we've tested it with like 20, 30, or even more. So there's not necessarily a restriction how many colleges you can add. Typically what we're seeing is students on average may have anywhere from like 3 to like 10. We have some of those students who've applied to like 15, 20, like they'll be able to do that. And this is where I recommend utilizing it throughout the whole process and not just for the award letter, because once you're in here, you'll be able to update your path, right? So maybe I'm in my junior year and I'm just showcasing I'm interested in these colleges. I've gone ahead and applied it. So, instead of having spreadsheets and keeping things everywhere else, you can just go ahead and just start updating your statuses. If you're working with a program or an advisor, you can connect with them so they can see your progress through that timeline. If maybe you're a parent and you want to follow and support your student throughout this process, you can get connected in your account so you can see what schools they're looking at. You can ask them to update their statuses as they get accepted, as they upload their award letters, until finally making their decision as well. When an advisor account and a student account are connected, the advisor essentially just gets to see their students' compare view so they can see what's happening. They can message the student, sending notifications. They can send links to them to ask them to do next action steps as needed. And then we're also, with a new update, allowing advisors to be able to upload on behalf of the student themselves, the award letter. I see a hand raised. Hi, Mayor.
Yes, it looks like we had a follow-up to the question earlier around the Blue and Gold Scholarship or opportunity. They said for FAFSA, I was wondering if it is possible to register myself as an independent because I earn less than 80,000. And then would I be able to be eligible for the UC Blue and Gold opportunity then? This does sound like some very specific financial aid coaching advice.
Yeah, this sounds like a FAFSA and not actually a UC question. So like the way you get flagged for independent and dependent, they have the tool actually within FAFSA now. It's not that you get to choose which route you go. It's based on if you are a dependent yourself, that means your parents are providing for more than half of your living. You are a dependent student. You won't be able to select as an independent. There's very few cases where students get to, if they're coming right out of high school, going to college, that they are on FAFSA, an independent student.
Such an important clarification. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
John, we have a few more questions, and I love how interactive our guests are today. So is that okay with you? Let's go through a few more questions. All right. I heard students should only work 10 hours. Where does that come from? What if they can and want to work more?
Yes. So those are recommendations. Again, a lot of it is based on research. We've seen from research that working is good. So we're not saying that you shouldn't work at all. It's that you need to consider the pros and cons, right? If you are working a lot of hours, what are you missing out on? So if you're working a lot of hours, are you really going to have enough time to be successful in the classroom? Also, maybe you are that student who can work 20 hours and still get your A's in the classroom, but then you're missing out on the social aspect, which is, are you getting the internship opportunities? Are you connecting with your advisors on a deeper level? Are you able to do some like webinars and like networking things that are happening during the hours that you're working? So that's more of what we're trying to hint towards, is finding a happy medium. That happy medium underneath like 10, maybe 15 hours allows you to have a lot of that, because we do understand that it's vital for a lot of our students, to be honest, to work in college to support and pay for their fees. I was that student who had to work those hours. It's also that student that was always going to financial aid asking, like, there's got to be a different scholarship available for me. I'm doing double major. Can you give me a secondary scholarship? Because you all never said that I can't double dip on a business major scholarship and a communication scholarship, right? So that's more recommendations to make sure we are setting our students up for success. Because honestly, if you're in a situation where you have to work 20 plus hours to just be able to pay your fees, you're not setting yourself up to thrive then. That's not an institution that's helping you thrive. That's more of that messaging.
Yep, absolutely. What's the difference between tuition and fees?
Yes, so tuition is what you're going to be paying, so that's larger amounts. Fees, like that can include a lot of things. So for some award letters, they bake them in together. Some schools, some of them have them split out. So a fee example that I can talk to you about is health fees. So health insurance. Most students don't know this. Families may not recognize this. It's going to be covered in our guides as well, which we'll reference later. If you don't fill out a health insurance waiver fee when you go to college, sometimes you will automatically be placed on that health insurance. That's an additional $2,000 that's going to be tacked on that you can avoid if your family already has health insurance. There's also technology fees, and additional fees if you're a specific major and there's certain equipment you may need. So that's the differentiation between that. The tuition fee usually covers your 12 to 15 credits a semester, whatever format that school is using. Yeah.
Thanks. What is a scholarship displacement?
Yes. So scholarship displacement is an action that happens that we've seen when a student works really hard, they've gotten their scholarship and financial aid. Maybe they got an outside scholarship that was going to help them reach that gap and maybe make that school really affordable, right? So before the outside scholarship, they had 30,000 scholarship. The fees were going to be 20,000. With the outside, they got another 15,000. The school sometimes will go back and say, oh, you got an additional scholarship. We're going to reduce the amount that we're giving you from our aid because you have this outside scholarship. And and their reasoning is that they're going to use that money to go help more students. But it's also unfair to the students who are working really hard to apply and win those scholarships, spending their time on that. So that's a little bit about it. Each school may deal with that differently. Some of our general guidance that we've given in the past around that is also just, it depends if that scholarship is going to you directly or if it's going to the college. If it's going to the college, they're going to know about it. And if I would suggest finding out how they do the scholarship displacement policy or getting ahead of it, letting financial aid know and asking them to reduce your loan or your work study before they touch any of your actual grants or scholarships.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mary just added some valuable additional context around it in the chat feature. Okay, let's do a couple more. So very thoughtful questions, so thank you. Can it be assumed that going to an out-of-state school is always going to be more expensive than an in-state one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we're talking about public schools, you can maybe make that assumption, but when you're talking about private schools, that's also very different, right? So if you're going to a school that has a large endowment, that has the ability to support students and give large amount of scholarships, I mean, you can look at the Harvards, the Stanfords, those big schools that are catering and want some schools from out of state. They can afford to provide maybe more financial aid. So private schools, you need to make sure you're checking out to see what they're offering you. At times, they can give you a better deal, but on a general consensus, usually you'll find much more affordable options within state, especially when you're considering California, who has the Cal Grant and so much more other financial aid opportunities that are being given out to students. Coming from Minnesota, our state aid is not as good as California. So I can tell you from that experience as well.
My child wants to take out a loan to close the gap. How much is reasonable to take out?
The student wants to take the loan out, right?
Yes.
Yes. So that is our recommendation, is the 5,500, which the student can, in their first year, is able to take that out. They don't have to apply for it. They usually have access to it. Now, if you're a Pell eligible student, potentially you'll get 3,500 or maybe even a little more in subsidized, which is the one that you want to take out first in primary. And then your secondary loan that you take out is the unsub. So depending on your FAFSA, maybe they give you more unsubsidized loan or they give you more subsidized loan. But that our recommendation is the 5,500 and specifically trying to utilize a subsidized loan first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. How do parents and students find colleges that offer more money for their achievements?
Yes. So if you already high achieving, a lot of times you're already going to get merit scholarships once you apply for FAFSA and you're getting acceptance letters from universities. But I think that my bigger suggestion would be more of starting doing your outside scholarship applications a lot earlier and often. There's misconception of thinking about doing outside scholarships just your senior year. You can start junior year, sophomore year. There's some scholarships for middle school students as well. Once you're in college, you can continue to apply for scholarships and winning them. That's something I did not know. I had some friends that I learned from. That is how they paid their college all the way through. So it's, how do you want to think about it? Are you willing to dedicate a couple hours a week throughout the whole year. So it's almost like your part-time job applying for scholarships to help you pay for that. Or are you wanting to just not do that and take out loans?
Yeah, so the key is to start early and do it often.
Yeah.
All right, let's last question for now. What are the important things I should look for around financial aid as my team begins to create their college list?
Yes. So as you're creating a college list, I think first and foremost, the financial aid part and comparing part will happen once you've gotten the acceptances, right? So the bigger encouragement is making sure your student doesn't undermatch, meaning they should have a good list of options. They should look at, if they're in state, at some UCs, at some CSUs, at some privates, right? And if they have an out-of-state school they want to look at, that's great. They can add that. Having a good list to start out from, and then from there for applying to, and then once they get accepted, that gives you a much broader range to look at. The worst situation you can be is you only apply for 2 colleges, you got accepted to 1, now you only have that option available, right? Versus maybe you applied to 15, got accepted to 10, and they're all different, right? As far as the endowments they have, if they're in-state, out-of-state, private. So then you get the award letter. Then you get to be in this decision part where you're getting a lot more options. Because some of these scenarios that I'm giving you, a lot of these students were either looking at potentially thinking, I'm going to go to a CSU because it's cheaper. But then they end up seeing that the UC Irvine was much more cheaper than they expected, even though the cost comes out as higher. Same thing with privates, potentially. Private colleges tend to have higher college costs, but they can also be the ones that can give you the most financial aid. Not always the case. And the only way you're going to know is once you have that financial aid. So it's the preparation before to have multitude of options is what I would recommend. How many schools makes a good list? Like, to be a thorough, I think like once you get into 8+ is a good start. Because I know the minimum programs have been trying to make sure students get is at least 4 to 6, but 8 means you probably have like 2 to 3, if you're talking about California students, 2 to 3 UCs, 2 to 3 CSUs, maybe like another 2 or 3 private, and maybe 1 either your dream school or out-of-state school to help round that out. Okay. I think we're good there for the questions. So I'll switch back to the video. All right.
Just want to say a really huge thank you, Dinara and John. That was fantastic.
Yeah. As we're getting close to the end, just want to put in the chat, because this is a reality. What are some of the anxieties either as a parent or your students are feeling about the next few months? Is it in the process of waiting to hear back from colleges still? Whether, being able to afford their top choice, deciding which school to attend if they've been accepted to multiple, or is it more of like, what if I don't get accepted to my top choice? You can put in the chat any of those numbers where you feel like you're at, or maybe your student is at currently. So I see a 4 in there. 2s. Yeah. With that, I just want to highlight, like, that part is a reality, right? The stress factor. And what we're really trying to do with this tool, and just how I'm going to close out too, is just how do we provide the information to reduce some of that anxiety around, right? And it's also, how do we prepare ourselves to face some of those hard truths? I've worked with students who had their dream school set at a private institution, and then all of a sudden they see the award letter come in, and it's devastating to them, right? But again, that preparation of having other options, uploading those other award letters, that's what's going to get them through it, to understand, okay, maybe I have my eyes set on that, but if I think about it, was that school really going to be the value that I was seeking for? Because we have this idea of chasing those big names at times, right? And that's one example I can give with that student. Thought about St. Mary's, was their dream school ever since they were younger, got accepted, was gun-ho on just going there, right? So already declined one of their SF state acceptance. But then later on, when I just asked them to upload their UC and CSU, they were just shocked at the difference because they expected, if I got into St. Mary's, I thought I was gonna have to pay that amount for every school. And their parents were telling them, like, you did what you need to do. So whatever the cost, we're gonna make sure we're gonna help cover you. But when they saw the difference highlighted and visually see it, the student was the one who took the step and said, I can't let my parents take $20,000, $30,000 a loan, and that's going to be every year. There's no way I'm going to do that. So it was heartbreaking that moment. And then it was also reflecting, right? Because they declined SF State because they were trying to be thoughtful and saying, I don't want someone on the waiting list not to get to their school if SF State is their school. But in the end, they wanted to go to that school because that had the better match. We looked at the UC, which gave them a great financial aid offer, but they recognized after more thoughtful conversation, it doesn't match what I need in terms of my career progression. I want to be a teacher, and it's much more of a teaching institution. They didn't want to go to Sonoma, even though it had a teaching program. That's where we had more thoughtful conversations saying, instead of going to a school they're not going to be happy at all, let's rethink and let's go to the 2-year route. And from there, they laid out their college courses, their tag program. So they were able to transfer out within 2 years. Because if you don't think that process through, you can get stuck, and it could be 3 or 4, and that has detrimental impact as well. But from there, they went back to SF State and they graduated within their 4-year mark. So it was a long way to get to where they needed to. But having that information and dealing with it, and then having steps and insights to have conversation can really support during this time. So again, if you have juniors who are looking through this, I would encourage them to create their account. You can connect with them. So as they're researching and exploring colleges, through the My Path, they can track their progress, but you can also see their progress as well throughout that journey. And the most important part is, again, emphasizing for them to always compare and getting the data points as your starting base for conversations. We're not trying to remove the conversation aspects. We're just trying to speed up the process of chasing and finding this information, right? Because the biggest part is, can you get the information you need and then have more drilled down conversations that are deeper, right? And then there's going to be guides, which we didn't get a chance to go through, but a lot of those guides have different topics that are around cost of attendance, types of financial aid. Again, those are accessible without an account, but when you do have a personalized account, it makes much more sense through the lens of what you're seeing on your dashboard. Along with types of financial aid, we talked about affordability and fit, navigating the process. And one that I would highlight for this time right now is how to write an appeal. Like, that would be a great guide to look through if you have a student, or you are currently a family member supporting a student and you're getting financial aid offer letters right now. You can appeal that. Not a lot of families know that. You can ask the institution for more money because there's certain circumstances that might have happened in your family circumstance that could change your financial aid offer letter. Then again, I saw a lot of questions around planning around student loan options. We have that, like, how do you get them on time? Because you have to take action steps to make sure you receive them. How much is too much in loans? Those were the questions that were popping up. We have our guide to reference that. And then just a breakdown of all the loans that are available and our hierarchy. Again, we recommend the Fed subsidized loan as your first one, unsub as your second. And then we are not really recommending for, the Parent Plus loan and all the other ones either, because it could get you and your family in a financially vulnerable situation. And then just to close out, some of the impact that the tool has had on students and families, it's really elevating the conversation, going from spreadsheets and numbers that can really turn students off to colors and circles, which makes it much more visually appealing for our learners today to gain that insight right away. And then also, quote from student class of 2022, I don't think I can go to that school. Just seeing the difference in cost, even if it's my dream school. I really didn't understand this until I saw this, even though you had told me. That was the St. Mary example that I was just talking about. They were very adamant until they visually saw it, even though I told them the numbers, right? And then from a parent, like, when they saw, wait, only $3,000 left without loans, yes, we can do that. Like, that excitement, that release of stress, knowing that there's a pathway to afford that college and support your student, is what we're trying to provide within this tool. So we'll stick around for like a couple minutes for those who've got any outstanding questions. Here's my contact information if you'd like to reach out to us. Again, the tool is free. You can go ahead and create an account and use it starting today.
Amazing. Thank you so much to both of our speakers, Dinara Seitova and John Tamrat with MoneyThink on their presentation. Let's talk college affordability.
We want to thank all of our incredible presenters from across 10 partners who shared their gifts of time, talent, and treasure with us over the last 4 weeks from February 23 through March 16, 2023. Whether you attended one session or more, please complete our exit ticket and let us know how we can enhance these sessions and this series for future years. Thank you to our generous partners for providing our wonderful gifts for our series raffle. You can win one of 5 prizes, like a backpack filled with goodies from our steering committee member MoneyThink, a $100 athletic gift card, or a Gap Inc. swag bag. Don't forget to check out the rest of this YouTube playlist for more great content from our partners. Thank you again to our 10 partners from across the state of California: the University of California, the California State University, the California Community Colleges, the California Student Aid Commission, ScholarShare 529 and CalKids, AICCU, or the Association for Independent California Colleges and Universities, the California Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and Decided Powered by MoneyThink. We also want to give special thanks to our connector sponsor, the College Futures Foundation, and to all of our generous sponsors. This free 4-week webinar series is brought to you by the Northern California College Promise Coalition, our members, our sponsors, our partners, and more. We invite you to share this series with your colleagues, students, and families across California. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.